In the heart of the mountains, where the air was crisp and the trees stretched high and endless, there lived a man whom most people in the nearby village rarely saw. He had chosen a life far from the noise and the busy streets, preferring the quiet. In the rhythm of the mountains, he was known to all in the village as the Mountain Man, and he carried a reputation that made people cautious. Some said he was stubborn, others said he was cold, but everyone agreed that he lived by his own rules, and that he did not answer to anyone. The village itself was small, with wooden houses clustered together along narrow paths. People were used to helping each other and sharing stories around the fire, but they also knew there were parts of the mountains that were dangerous and that it was best to leave the Mountain Man alone. He had a cabin deep in the forest, built with his own hands, and it was said that he could survive anything the mountains threw at him. One morning, when the sun had just started to rise and cast golden light across the peaks, 3 visitors arrived in the village. They were not traveling together, but they all had one thing in common. They needed help, and they were all directed to the Mountain Man by people who believed that he was the only one capable of handling what they faced. The villagers watched nervously because they had never seen anyone approach him with confidence, let alone expect him to respond with kindness. The first visitor was a parent with worry written across every line of the face. The child had wandered off into the woods the night before and had not returned. The parent had searched and called out names, but the forest was vast and silent, and it seemed impossible to find the child alone. When the parent approached the Mountain Man, people shook their heads. Some whispered that he would refuse, and some said that the child would never be seen again. The Mountain Man listened quietly, did not ask questions, he did not express doubt. He only looked toward the forest, and then at the parent. His eyes were calm, but something in them suggested understanding. He nodded once and began to move toward the woods. People followed at a distance, watching as he disappeared among the trees, leaving the parent to hope silently that the child would be found. As he walked the paths only he knew, the mountains revealed themselves. He stepped over roots and rocks with the ease of someone who had walked these trails for years. The wind carried the sound of birds and rustling leaves, and he moved without fear, without hesitation. The parent followed as best as they could, trying to keep up, but the Mountain Man was fast and sure. Search took hours, and the parent felt the weight of worry. In every step, they thought about the night the child had been alone, and the fear returned to their chest. But the Mountain Man never stopped. He called out softly and listened for answers in the echo of the mountains. Every sound mattered to him, and he knew how to read them. Finally, as the sun moved higher in the sky, a small figure appeared at the edge of a clearing. The child was safe, though tired and frightened. The parent ran forward and scooped the child up, holding them close to the Mountain Man watched quietly as the reunion happened. His face remained calm, but inside, there was a sense of satisfaction. He had done what was needed and done it without fanfare. The parent thanked him again and again, but the Mountain Man only nodded and turned back toward the village. He had no need for praise and no desire for attention. He moved through the forest like a shadow, blending with the trees and the light and the sounds of nature. The second visitor arrived not long after. The farmer had come from the lower fields, carrying worry in the eyes and a heavy heart. His livestock were sick, and without the animals his family could not survive. The villagers knew that asking the Mountain Man was a long shot. Some even tried to dissuade the farmer, saying that he would refuse, that he would not get involved in someone else's problems. But the farmer insisted, and soon found himself standing before the cabin in the woods. The Mountain Man listened as the farmer explained the situation. The voice was steady, but the eyes revealed desperation. The Mountain Man looked at the farmer, then toward the mountains and the fields, and then back again. He said yes, the journey to the farm was not easy. The Mountain Man and the farmer traveled through rocky paths and across streams. He examined each animal carefully, using knowledge and skills that came from years of living close to nature. Some remedies were simple, others required patience and careful observation. He worked without complaint, taking each step as it came, until the animals began to show signs of recovery. The farmer watched in awe and gratitude, realizing that the stories he had heard were true. The Mountain Man did not refuse, he did not demand anything in return. He simply helped because it was needed and because he could. The third visitor was a widow who had struggled through many winters in a small cabin that was beginning to crumble. The thought of another harsh winter with the roof leaking and the walls weakened filled her with dread. She had come to the mountain man as a last hope, because everyone knew that if anyone could help survive the winter, it would be him. The villagers gathered. As she explained her plight, they expected a refusal, they expected disappointment. But the mountain man said yes again. He worked through days of cold and rain, fixing the cabin, reinforcing the walls, and making sure that it could withstand the snow and wind that would come. The widow watched quietly as he worked tirelessly without complaint. He had no demand for payment or recognition. He simply did what needed to be done with strength and courage. The days passed. The villagers began to notice a change in their own perception. They had always seen the mountain man as distant and perhaps difficult, but now they could see the depth of his character. His willingness to help without question showed a side of humanity that was rare and valuable. By the time the cabin was ready for winter, the widow was able to breathe easier. The mountain man stood back, looking at the work with quiet satisfaction. He did not stay for thanks or celebration. He returned to his paths in the mountains and to the life he had chosen. In the village, the stories of that morning spread quickly. Everyone talked about the mountain man who said yes to all 3 visitors. They spoke of the lost child returned safely, the livestock saved, and the cabin repaired for winter. They began to realize that kindness can come in unexpected forms, that courage can be quiet, and that sometimes the people who seem distant are the ones capable of the greatest care. The mountain man returned to his solitude, but he left behind a sense of hope and respect. In the village, people walked a little taller, knowing that someone among them had the strength and the heart to do what others thought impossible. The mountains continued to stand tall around him, and the life he had chosen continued to be simple and quiet. But now, with the knowledge that even in solitude there can be connection and impact, from that day on, the villagers remembered the morning when the mountain man did not refuse when everyone expected him to say no. They remembered that he had helped 3 people, each in need, and in doing so had taught them a lesson about trust, patience, and the quiet power of yes. The stories of that day passed from one person to another, growing slightly with each telling, but always true in the heart of those who had witnessed it, and those who had come to know the mountain man in a new way. After the mountain man had helped the lost child and returned safely to his cabin, word of his actions spread quickly through the village. People began to whisper in quiet corners about the courage and care that he had shown. They spoke about the way he had moved through the mountains, like he belonged to them, like every rock and tree were a part of his knowledge and understanding. The second visitor, the farmer, waited anxiously at the edge of the village. His livestock had been growing weaker each day, and his worry weighed heavily on his shoulders. The fields were dry in some places and muddy in others, and the winter was coming fast. He knew that without help he could lose everything. He also knew that asking the mountain man was his only hope, even though the villagers tried to warn him that it was unlikely to succeed. The mountain man listened to the farmer as he explained the problems with the animals. He examined each one, carefully noticing subtle signs that others might have missed. He touched the coats and checked the eyes and listened to the breathing of every animal. His hands moved confidently, as if guided by knowledge accumulated over years of living close to nature. He began treating the animals with simple remedies. Some were herbs he had gathered himself, others were techniques learned from watching the world around him. He worked quietly and patiently, explaining to the farmer what he was doing. Farmer tried to help, but mostly watched and learned from the mountain man, who seemed to understand the animals in a way that went beyond words. Days passed. As the mountain man moved through the fields, checking on the livestock, he woke early before the sun rose, and sometimes stayed late after it had gone down. He did not complain about the cold or the wind or the mud that soaked his clothes. He only focused on the task at hand, and the animals slowly began to show signs of improvement. The farmer noticed that the mountain man never asked for anything in return. He did not speak of reward or recognition. He simply worked as though it was his duty to care for those in need without expecting anything back. The farmer could feel a deep respect growing in him for this quiet man who had chosen a life of solitude, but still reached out when someone needed help. The villagers watched from a distance. Many had doubts at first. Some even tried to intervene to prevent the mountain man from getting involved, but as the days passed, they began to see the change in the animals and the calm determination in the farmer, who had been so worried. He had begun to hope again because of the mountain man's care. Evening came, and the mountain Man would sit by the fire, occasionally resting and preparing for the next day. Spoke very little, but when he did, he offered simple advice about caring for the animals and watching for changes in their health. He taught the farmer not only to follow his methods, but also to observe and understand the animals themselves. The animals regained their strength one by one. Some had been very sick and required long attention, while others needed less care, but the mountain man treated all of them with the same patience and attention. He moved like a shadow across the fields, watching the smallest detail, never missing anything. Farmer felt a mix of gratitude and humility. He realized that it was not just the skill of the mountain man that mattered, but his willingness to step into a situation that was not his own to fix it, was the courage to care when everyone expected refusal. It was the patience to work through problems methodically without hurry and without complaint. Neighbors who had once doubted began to come closer, quietly observing the work. The mountain man did not speak to them or seek their approval, but they could not help but notice the skill and dedication in every action. It became a living lesson about quiet strength and the power of helping without expectation. Evan. After the animals had recovered, he continued to guide the farmer, showing how to prevent problems in the future. He explained simple routines and careful observations that could save time. In hardship, he left the farmer more confident and prepared than he had ever been before. One morning, after several weeks, the mountain man finally prepared to leave. The livestock were healthy, the fields had been checked, and the farmer was ready to take over the care himself. The mountain man packed his simple belongings and walked back toward his cabin in the mountains, moving with ease and quiet strength as he had always done. The villagers gathered to see him off. They did not shout or cheer, for he did not seek recognition, but there was a feeling in the air of respect and awe. They had witnessed his skill, his patience, and his courage. They had learned that sometimes those who seem most distant have the deepest capacity to help them. Farmer stood silently as the mountain man disappeared into the trees, and then the forest swallowed him from view. The gratitude in his heart was deep, and he knew that he had been given more than just help for his animals. He had been shown a way of living with courage, patience, and humility. As the mountain man moved through the mountains, he reflected on the work he had done. He did not think about praise or recognition. He only considered the needs of those he had helped and whether he had done enough to make a difference. He moved with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had used his abilities for good without expectation. The villagers began to tell the story of the mountain man and the farmer. Often people spoke of it in the evenings. By the fire and two travelers passing through, they told how a man who lived alone in the mountains had said yes to someone in need and had worked tirelessly to bring life back to the farm. It became a story not just of help, but of trust, patience, and courage. Meanwhile, the widow who lived in a small cabin on the edge of the village watched and listened to these stories. She had heard of the mountain man's actions and felt a spark of hope. She knew that her own problems with her cabin in the coming winter might be impossible to solve alone, but perhaps the man who had helped the farmer could also help her. She approached him carefully, following the paths that led to his cabin. The villagers warned her that he might refuse, that he preferred solitude and that he did not involve himself in others' lives, but she had seen what he had done and believed that he could help. The mountain man listened as she explained her situation. The cabin was weak, the roof had holes, and the walls were cracked. She feared the coming winter and the harsh winds and snow that would make her life unbearable. He looked at the cabin from a distance, then back at the widow, and simply said yes. In the following days, he began working on the cabin. He lifted logs, repaired walls, and fixed the roof, moving with the strength and precision that had become familiar to the villagers. He worked through rain and cold, moving carefully to make the home safe and secure for the coming winter. The widow watched silently. Learning from his methods, she offered small help, but mostly observed the patience and care in every action. The mountain man did not rush. He did not complain. He simply worked steadily and effectively, making sure that the work was done properly. Villagers watched from a distance. They had come to expect refusal, but now they saw that the mountain man had a heart capable of helping those in need. He did not speak of reward or recognition. He only acted with quiet courage and deep understanding of the tasks before him. Days turned into weeks, and the cabin began to take shape. The walls were strong, the roof secure, and the windows patched against the cold. He worked tirelessly, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. Each movement was deliberate, each decision careful and thoughtful. Widow felt a deep gratitude for the mountain man and a new respect for the quiet courage and strength that he carried. She realized that true help came not from words but from actions that were consistent. Patient and kind, the villagers continued to tell the story of the mountain man who said yes to the farmer and the widow. They spoke of his skill, patience, and courage. They spoke of how he worked without complaint and how he showed the true power of helping without expectation. They remembered that he had chosen to act when others thought he would not, and in doing so had taught them the value of trust, patience, and quiet strength. The mountain man returned to his cabin deep in the mountains. Moving silently through the trees and rocks, he reflected on the work he had done, knowing that he had helped those who needed him. He did not think of recognition or reward. He only considered whether he had made a difference and done what was necessary by. The time winter approached the village and the fields. Already the animals healthy and the cabin secure, the villagers had come to understand the mountain man in a new way. They had seen his skill, courage, and heart. They had learned that even those who live apart from the world can have a profound impact when they choose to act with kindness and courage. Though the mountain man remained in the mountains as he always had, but now the villagers remembered his deeds. They spoke of the farmer and the widow and how he had said yes when everyone expected him to refuse. They carried the lessons of patience, courage, and quiet strength into their own lives, inspired by a man who lived simply yet acted with the deepest care. The widow watched the mountain man as he moved around the cabin. She had never seen anyone work with such steady focus and care. Each movement he made was deliberate and precise as he repaired the walls and strengthened the roof. She realized that this was not just skill. It was patience and a kind of quiet courage that she had never encountered before. The days were long, and the weather was unpredictable. Rain came and went, and the wind blew through the trees, but the mountain man did not falter. He worked steadily, carrying logs and tools and reinforcing the weak points of the cabin. The widow tried to help, but mostly observed, learning from the way he moved and the decisions he made. At times the work seemed endless. The cabin had been in disrepair for many years, and the mountain man tackled it with the same determination he had shown with the lost child and the farmer. His hands were strong and his mind focused on every detail, ensuring that the work would hold against the harsh winter to come. The villagers watched quietly from a distance. They had expected refusal or at least hesitation, but instead they saw the mountain man working tirelessly to help someone in need. They began to understand that his reputation for solitude and independence did not mean he lacked heart. It only meant that he chose carefully when and where to act. Each day, the widow grew more confident. She began to anticipate what needed to be done and slowly started assisting where she could. Her hands became stronger, and her knowledge grew. She realized that the mountain man was not only helping her cabin, but teaching her how to take care of it herself. He did not simply solve the problem for her. He guided her to understand and manage it. The mountain man moved with remarkable ease across the uneven ground, lifting heavy logs and placing them precisely. He measured and adjusted with a careful eye, ensuring that everything was solid. He repaired the roof in sections, replacing broken beams and ceiling cracks where the cold wind could enter the walls, were reinforced with fresh timber and mud, filling gaps that could let snow in. The widow marveled at his work. She had never seen such dedication to another person's well-being. She began to understand that his help was more than physical labor. It was a gift of time, patience, and attention. He gave himself fully to the task without expectation or demand. As the days passed, the cabin began to take shape. Each repair made it warmer, stronger, and more secure. The widow could finally imagine a winter where she would be safe from the harsh winds and snow. She felt a deep gratitude not only for the work itself, but for the lesson in perseverance and care. The villagers could not help but notice the transformation. The mountain man's actions spoke louder than any words could. He demonstrated that true courage was not in fighting or boasting, but in quietly facing challenges and helping where it was needed. His reputation began to shift from a solitary man to someone who carried wisdom and kindness in equal measure. The widow observed his methods carefully. She learned how to assess which beams were weak, how to replace them without compromising the structure, and how to protect the cabin from the rain and snow, the mountain man did not rush. He worked deliberately, ensuring that each step was correct and durable. He did not look for praise or attention, he only focused on the work. One morning the widow awoke to find the mountain man already at work. He had started before sunrise, moving through the cold mist and damp air. The sound of tools and the smell of fresh timber filled the morning. He had created a rhythm that matched the mountains around them. Steady, calm and strong, the widow joined him with small tasks, sweeping the floor and fetching tools. She felt a sense of purpose she had not known before. The mountain man's presence gave her confidence to face challenges and inspired her to continue working. Even when her strength faltered, he did not speak much, but his actions taught more than words ever could. Villagers watched the progress with quiet admiration. They had always thought of the mountain man as someone distant and unapproachable. But now they saw the heart behind his solitude. They realized that his yes to the widow was not an exception, but a reflection of his character. He helped because it was right, because he could, and because he understood the value of action over words. The roof neared completion. The widow noticed how each piece of timber was carefully fitted together. Each nail driven in place was precise and firm. She saw how he worked methodically, checking every angle and reinforcing weak points. She realized that the cabin was becoming stronger than it had ever been, and would withstand even the harshest winter storms. The mountain man did not allow the widow to become discouraged. He guided her hands when she struggled, showed her how to balance a beam and how to brace a wall. She began to see that his teachings extended beyond the cabin. They were lessons in patience, perseverance, and quiet strength. She felt herself changing as she worked alongside him, learning to face difficulty with determination. And calm days turned into weeks. The cabin was transformed. Each repair made it more secure and livable. The widow could finally rest easy, knowing that the coming winter would not bring the fear and uncertainty she had felt before. She had gained not only a safe home, but also knowledge and confidence to care for it herself. Mountain Man continued his work, undeterred by rain, wind, or cold. He moved with the same steady focus as when he had helped the lost child and the farmer. Each action was deliberate, each decision thoughtful. He did not seek recognition or reward. His satisfaction came from the certainty that his work was done well and would make a lasting difference. The villagers began to speak in hushed tones about the mountain man's deeds. They shared stories of the lost child, the farmer, and now the widow. They spoke of his skill, patience, and quiet courage. They marveled at his ability to face challenges without complaint and to help those in need without hesitation. They began to see him as a man of wisdom and kindness rather than simply a recluse. The widow felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had learned more than she had expected about construction, patience, and resilience. She had also learned about the power of kindness and the strength it takes to help without expectation. She realized that the mountain man's yes had changed her life and given her a new perspective on trust and sundant courage. As the work neared completion, the mountain man packed his tools and prepared to return to the mountains. He moved quietly through the forest back to his cabin, leaving the widow with a home that was strong, secure, and ready for winter. He left behind more than repairs. He left lessons in courage, patience, and quiet determination. The villagers continued to tell the story of the mountain man who said yes when everyone expected refusal. They spoke of how he had helped a child, a farmer, and a widow, each in need. They marveled at his ability to work with skill and patience. They learned that courage was not always loud and visible, but often quiet, steady, and powerful in its impact. The widow stood outside her cabin, looking at the work completed. She felt warmth in her heart for the man who had chosen to help her. She understood the lessons he had taught and the importance of patience and careful action. She knew that the winter ahead would be harsh, but she felt prepared, confident, and safe. Because of his guidance, the mountain man returned to his paths. In the mountains, moving silently through the trees, he reflected on the work he had done and the lives he had touched. Did not think of recognition or praise, only of whether he had made a difference. He had faced each challenge with patience and skill and left a lasting impact on those who had sought his help. The villagers remembered the deeds of the mountain man. They spoke of his courage, patience, and quiet strength. They told stories of the lost child, the farmer, and the widow, and how he had chosen to help when everyone expected him to refuse. They learned the value of trust, perseverance, and kindness inspired by a man who lived simply but acted with the deepest care. As winter approached, the mountains stood tall and silent. The mountain man continued his solitary life, but the impact of his actions remained. The villagers carried the lessons he had taught in their hearts. They remembered that true courage and kindness often came in quiet forms, and that sometimes the people who seem most distant have the greatest capacity to make a difference in the lives of others. Winter was approaching, and the mountain man continued to live quietly in his cabin, surrounded by the peaks and forests that he knew so well. The villagers had watched his work with the lost child, the farmer, and the widow, and had come to understand that his yes was not given lightly, but it carried great power and courage. One morning another visitor arrived in the village, seeking help with a problem that seemed impossible to solve. The visitor was a small family who had been struggling with harsh conditions in the mountains. Their cabin had been damaged by storms, and the approaching winter threatened to make life unbearable. They had heard of the mountain man and hoped that he could help them like he had helped others. Villagers tried to warn them that he was distant and unlikely to agree, but they knew that he had helped 3 others and believed there was a chance. That family found the mountain man at the edge of his cabin. He listened quietly as they explained their situation, did not rush or speak hastily. His eyes studied the cabin, the damage, and the surrounding terrain carefully. He nodded once and agreed to help. They were surprised but grateful and felt a spark of hope they had not felt for a long time. Mountain man moved quickly and efficiently through the tasks ahead. He assessed the damage to the cabin and the surrounding land. He measured the weakest points of the walls and roof and began planning how to reinforce them. Carried logs and stones, moving with ease across the uneven ground. He instructed the family on simple ways to help and demonstrated each step with patience. Past as he worked with the family, strengthening the cabin and preparing it for winter, he showed them how to stack firewood in a safe place, how to patch walls with mud and stones, and how to check for leaks that could let snow in. Each action was deliberate and careful. Each lesson taught the family more than just how to repair the cabin. They learned patience, focus, and perseverance. Villagers watched as the mountain man and the family worked together. They had expected him to refuse, as they had in the past for others, but instead he had said yes again. They began to see a pattern in his actions. He helped not because he sought reward, but because he understood the importance of action and care. He gave time and strength to those in need without hesitation. The family struggled at first. They had little experience and much fear about the approaching winter. The mountain man guided them gently. He showed how to lift heavy logs without injury, how to reinforce walls without damaging other parts, and how to protect the cabin from wind and snow. He worked alongside them, teaching through example rather than words. The children in the family watched in awe as he moved with confidence and strength. He allowed them to carry small pieces of wood and perform safe tasks, giving them a sense of purpose and courage. They began to feel capable and strong under his guidance. They learned that challenges could be met with patience and determination. The widow, who had been helped before, came to see the progress. She had learned much from the mountain man and wanted to share advice and encouragement. She worked alongside the family, helping where she could. The mountain man allowed her to guide small tasks, showing trust in her understanding and abilities. He continued to work quietly without seeking praise. As the days grew colder, the mountain man prepared the cabin for the harshest weather. He ensured the roof was strong, the walls sealed, and the fire area safe and effective. He reinforced weak areas with logs and stones and made sure the family understood how to maintain the improvements they observed carefully and learned through doing. The villagers began to change their view of the mountain man entirely. They no longer saw him as distant or unapproachable. They recognized that his solitude was a choice, but his actions were full of humanity. In courage, they spoke of him in new ways, telling stories of his skill, patience, and quiet strength. They marveled at how he had helped so many without seeking reward or recognitions. The mountain man continued to teach the family in subtle ways, showed them how to observe the environment for signs of danger, how to keep the cabin warm and safe, and how to act calmly when difficulties arose. Each lesson was given through example. He rarely spoke at length, but his actions communicated wisdom. In Kerr, the family began to feel confident and prepared. They understood more about survival and resilience than they had ever known. They realized that the mountain man's help was not just about the cabin, it was about building skills, confidence, and courage. He had given them tools for life beyond just repairs. Even the children learned the value of patience and careful action. They saw that rushing led to mistakes, and that steady focus produced results they learned to work together under. His guidance and to trust in their own growing abilities, the mountain man's presence had transformed fear into hope. The mountain man worked tirelessly through the cold and wind. He did not complain or show fatigue. His focus remained on the tasks, and on teaching the family how to care for themselves in their cabin. He moved through each challenge methodically, ensuring that nothing was left to chance, and that the work was solid and enduring. As the final days of work approached, he reviewed every detail, ensuring that the cabin was ready for winter. He checked the roof, the walls, and the fire area. He walked through the surrounding area, showing the family where hazards might appear and how to handle them calmly. He left no detail unattended. Villagers gathered as the mountain man prepared to leave. They had witnessed yet another example of his courage and care. They saw how he had helped a family in need, prepared them for winter, and taught lessons in patience, perseverance, and focus. They realized that his yes carried more than physical help. It carried hope, strength, and the example of quiet courage. The family stood together, looking at their cabin safe and secure. They felt gratitude not only for the repairs, but for the lessons they had learned. They knew that winter would be harsh, but they felt ready, confident, and capable because of the mountain man's guidance. His yes had transformed fear into preparedness. The mountain man returned to his cabin in the mountains, moving quietly through the trees and rocks. He reflected on the work he had done. He did not think of reward or recognition, only of whether he had helped effectively. He had faced challenges calmly and skillfully, and left lasting impact on those he had assisted. The villagers continued to share stories of the mountain man. They spoke of the lost child, the farmer, the widow, and now the small family. They told of his skill, patience, and quiet strength. They marveled at his ability to help without expectation. They learned that courage could be quiet and that kindness could be powerful and transformative. The family carried the lessons they had learned into their daily lives. They understood more about survival, patience, and resilience. They felt confident in their abilities and grateful for the guidance they had received. They knew that the mountain man's influence would remain with them long after he had returned to his solitude. The mountain man remained in the mountains, as he always had, he continued his solitary life, but the impact of his actions remained in the village and the lives of those he had helped. The villagers had learned from his example. They understood the value of patience, courage, and quiet determination. They remembered that his yes had changed lives, and that true strength often comes from careful, consistent action and deep care for others. The mountain man returned to his cabin in the mountains. With the snow beginning to cover the higher peaks, the forest was quiet, except for the wind moving through the trees and the occasional bird that sang in the distance. He walked with his usual calm and steady pace, reflecting on the lives he had touched over the past months and the work he had done to help those in need. The villagers continued to speak of his deeds. They talked about how he had found the lost child in the woods, how he had helped the farmer save the livestock, how he had repaired the widow's cabin, and now how he had prepared a family for the harsh winter. They realized that his yes had been given many times, and each time it had brought hope, courage, and safety. People began to understand the lessons he had shared without words. The mountain man did not ask for recognition or praise, but his actions had left a lasting impression. He had shown patience, perseverance, and quiet courage. In each task he had taught others to face challenges calmly and to act with care and determination. The lost child returned safely to the parent grew stronger and more confident. With each passing day, they learned to navigate the woods carefully and respectfully. They had seen the value of guidance and support, and how one person willing to help could change the outcome of a fearful situation. The memory of the mountain man guiding them through the forest stayed with them as a reminder of the power of calm action. The farmer continued to care for the livestock. Using the knowledge he had gained from the mountain man, he moved with more confidence and patience, noticing the smallest changes in the animals. He shared what he had learned with neighbors and other farmers, teaching them the importance of observation and care. The mountain man's influence extended beyond the immediate, help he had given and became a source of lasting change in the village. The widow tended to her home with renewed strength. She remembered the lessons of patience and careful work as she maintained the cabin she shared, the knowledge she had gained. With others in the village who were preparing for the winter, her confidence grew because of the experience, and she learned that challenges could be faced with determination and skill. The family that had sought help in the mountains felt prepared. For the long winter, they had learned to work together and to act with focus and patience. They had gained confidence and a sense of capability from the guidance of the mountain man. Each day they applied what they had learned, reinforcing the home. In preparing firewood, they felt secure knowing that they were ready and capable. The villagers began to treat the mountain man differently. They no longer feared his solitude or misunderstood his quiet ways. They respected his knowledge, skill, and the courage he displayed in helping those in need. They understood that strength could be quiet and that true courage often comes from patience, consistent action, and the willingness to help others without expectation. The mountain man continued to live his life in the mountains. He moved through the trees and rocks with ease and confidence. He reflected on the work he had done and the lives he had touched. He did not think of reward or recognition, only of whether he had helped effectively, and whether those he had assisted had gained strength, courage, and understanding from the experience. As winter settled over the mountains, the villagers continued to tell stories of the mountain man. They spoke of the lost child, the farmer, the widow, and the family he had helped. Each story was shared with a sense of awe and gratitude. They spoke of his skill, patience, and quiet courage, and how he had chosen to act when everyone expected him to refuse. The stories reminded them that even those who live apart from the world can have a profound and lasting impact. The mountain man's actions inspired others in the village to act with patience, courage, and care. They began to help each other more thoughtfully and to approach challenges with calm determination. They learned that even small acts of assistance and guidance could change lives, and that quiet courage was often more powerful than loud words or displays. The winter passed, and the mountains stood tall and silent. The mountain man continued his life quietly, observing nature and maintaining his cabin. He occasionally ventured into the village to check on those he had helped and offer guidance when needed. He remained humble and focused on action rather than words. Lost child grew stronger and more confident. The farmer shared his knowledge and skills with the community. The widow maintained her home and inspired others with her patience and strength. The family navigated the mountains with confidence and care. The lessons they had learned from the mountain man continued to shape their lives in meaningful ways. The villagers carried the memory of the mountain man's courage, patience, and quiet strength in their hearts. They told stories of his deeds to the next generation and shared the lessons of kindness and determination. He became a symbol of what could be achieved through careful action and willingness to help. Those who had once doubted him learned that true strength often comes from the quiet choice to say yes. When everyone expects refusal, the mountain man's influence continued to ripple through the village and the surrounding mountains. Each act of help had created a legacy of patience, courage, and care. People remembered not just the physical help he had given, but the lessons he had taught through action. They had learned that helping others without expectation can change lives, and that quiet strength can inspire lasting transformation. The snow melted and the seasons changed. The mountain man remained in his home in the mountains, living simply, but with purpose. His yes had created hope and safety in the lives of many. He continued to observe the forest, the wildlife, and the village from a distance. He did not need praise or recognition, but found satisfaction in knowing that he had made a difference. The villagers respected his solitude and valued his guidance. They remembered the mountain man who had said yes when no one expected it, and how his actions had touched their lives. They understood that courage, patience, and quiet determination were as important as skill and strength. They had learned to face their own challenges with the lessons he had provided in the years that followed. The stories of the mountain man who had helped the lost child, the farmer, the widow, and the family became part of the village history. They shared the lessons of kindness, courage, and patience, and the importance of helping others without expectation. His legacy endured as a reminder that one person willing to act with care and determination can change many lives, and that True strength is often found in quiet actions that speak louder than words spring. Arrived in the mountains, and the forest began to come alive with new growth. The snow melted slowly, revealing streams and flowers, and the air was filled with the sound of birds. The mountain man continued his quiet life in the cabin, observing the changes around him, but also thinking about the lives he had touched and the lessons he had shared with the villagers. The villagers were eager to see him, as they often had questions about the mountain and about how to handle new challenges that the changing season might bring. They respected his knowledge and patience and sought guidance when needed. They no longer feared his solitude, but understood it as a choice to live simply while offering help when necessary. One morning, a young boy arrived at the edge of the forest. He had heard stories about the mountain man and his courage and patience. He wanted to learn about the mountains and how to survive safely in the woods. The villagers warned him that it would not be easy, that the mountain man did not often take students, but the boy was determined and brave. The mountain man listened carefully as the boy explained his desire to learn. He looked at the boy and studied his eagerness and determination. He nodded and agreed to teach him the ways of the forest. The boy was thrilled and full of energy, ready to follow and learn each lesson with patience and care. The first lessons were simple but important. The mountain man showed the boy how to recognize safe paths and avoid dangerous areas, how to move quietly and watch for signs of wildlife, and how to read the changes in the weather by observing the clouds, wind, and temperature. Each lesson was given slowly and carefully, allowing the boy to absorb the knowledge and practice. Each skilled. The boy struggled at first. Some tasks were difficult and required strength and patience. The mountain man did not scold or show frustration. He guided the boy gently, offering advice and demonstrating each movement until the boy could do it himself. The lessons were not only about survival, but also about focus, perseverance, and confidence. As days passed, the boy became more skilled and confident. He learned how to build a small shelter using branches and leaves, how to find water and ensure it was safe to drink, and how to start a small fire carefully to stay warm. The mountain man watched and guided, making sure each step was safe and effective. He also taught the boy how to respect nature and understand the balance of the forest. Meanwhile, the villagers observed the teaching from a distance. They had come to trust the mountain man, and now they saw his willingness to share his knowledge with the next generation. They realized that his help was not only for immediate problems, but also for preparing people to face challenges on their own. He was shaping courage, patience, and understanding through his actions. The boy learned more than just survival. He learned patience and humility. He realized that rushing led to mistakes and that careful observation could prevent problems. He also learned to trust his own judgment and to remain calm in difficult situations. The mountain man's guidance gave him confidence and resilience. One day, the boy faced a challenge on his own. A small storm arrived suddenly, with strong wind and rain. He remembered the mountain man's lessons. He observed the clouds and listened to the sounds of the forest. He found shelter quickly and built a small fire to stay warm. He remained calm and safe, using the skills he had learned. His success was a reflection of the careful teaching he had received. The mountain man watched from a distance, satisfied with the boy's progress. He knew that true learning came from experience and careful guidance. He continued to offer lessons on navigation, finding food, understanding the behavior of animals, and recognizing subtle changes in the forest that could signal danger. He emphasized that patience, focus, and observation were as important as strength and skill. The villagers began to see the boy as a symbol of what could be achieved with guidance and effort. They realized that the mountain man's influence was extending beyond immediate help. He was creating a legacy of knowledge, courage, and careful action that would continue to benefit the community for years to come. The boy also learned about helping others. He accompanied the mountain man to visit villagers who needed advice or assistance. He observed how the mountain man offered guidance without taking over the task, how he allowed people to learn through their own efforts while ensuring safety and success. The boy began to understand that true help empowers others rather than doing everything for them. Season changed and spring became summer. The forest was filled with life, and the boy continued to grow stronger and more capable. He learned to move through the forest with ease, to observe and respond to changes and to make decisions carefully and confidently. His respect for the mountain man grew as he realized the depth of his patience and understanding. Villagers benefited from the knowledge being shared. The boy helped with small tasks in the community, applying what he had learned. He showed careful attention to detail and a steady approach to challenges. He shared the lessons of patience and observation he had learned with others. Helping them to see the value of calm determination, the mountain man continued his quiet life in the mountains. He observed the forest and wildlife and maintained his cabin. He also took time to guide the boy and occasionally offered advice to the villagers when asked. His presence was steady, calm, and inspiring, demonstrating through action the importance of patience, courage, and careful thought. The villagers remembered his deeds with the lost child, the farmer, the widow, the family, and now the boy. They spoke of his skill, patience, and quiet strength, and how he had said yes when everyone expected refusal. They understood that his actions had created a legacy of courage, knowledge, and perseverance that would endure long beyond his own life. The boy grew more confident and independent. He learned to solve problems calmly, to face challenges with patience, and to help others without expecting reward. He realized that the mountain man's lessons were not just about surviving in the forest, but about facing life with careful thought, courage, and kindness. Mountain Man observed the boy's growth with quiet satisfaction. He understood that true success was not in doing everything himself, but in guiding others to learn and grow. He had given his knowledge and patience to someone who would carry it forward, teaching others in turn and extending the legacy of careful courage and quiet strength. The villagers continued to share the stories of the mountain man. They spoke of the lessons learned from the lost child, the farmer, the widow, the family, and the boy. They marveled at his willingness to act without expectation and at the power of patience, observation, and quiet determination. They understood that his influence had touched many lives and would continue to do so for generations. As summer deepened, the mountains remained tall and steady. The mountain man lived quietly in his cabin, observing the forest and the village from a distance. He continued to offer guidance and teaching to those who sought it. He moved with calm strength and focus, demonstrating the value of careful action and patience. His yes had created hope and courage in many lives, and his lessons continued to inspire the village and the forest alike.